the ground shake.
What's up everyone, and this is the final part of the 3-part video, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the big tanks of the new British tank tree, British tank destroyers that are coming in update 2.1. So in this video we're going to be taking a look at the AT-15, the Tortoise, and finally the 183, which is really hyped. So to start off, we'll take a look at the AT-15 stats. So the AT-15 is the tier 8 in the British tank destroyer tech tree. This follows the same kind of pattern as its predecessors. It's slow, it's got a lot of armor, it's got a really good gun, and yeah. So the AT-15 has 1,450 hit points, and it gets a bump up in armor from its predecessors. So it's now 228mm at the front, 152 at the sides, and 101mm at the rear. So armor tier 8 and above is going to start becoming less relevant as tanks get high penetration, because tanks like the IS-3, the Tiger II, with their top guns will have absolutely no problems going through you. Even if you're not angled, as you see these cheeks right here, you can just simply go. You've got a 50-50 chance, but if you aim at the mantler or the upper front plate, you've got no problem. And the bulging weak spot there as well is for guns that don't have the penetration to go through. So it's either you get penetrated by tanks if you don't angle, or you just get hit in the weak spot if the players know what they're doing, which is not great, but it's still there, I guess. It still has armor and it can still bounce shots from this tier 8. In terms of maneuverability, this thing weighs 60.96 tons, which is a massive increase in weight. It gets a bump up in the engine power to 650, which gives it a 10.66 horsepower per ton ratio. It's got the same 20 km top speed limit and the same 20 degrees a second traverse speed as most of the predecessors, which isn't great. The top gun on this tank is a 20-pounder. It gets 14.74 rounds a minute. That's really good. It's got the same 226mm of penetration as the AT-7 down at tier 7. The same, I think it's just got the same penetration, same alpha damage, but it's got a much better accuracy at 0.3, which makes it joint most accurate gun in the game with German tanks. And it also gets 1.7 aim time, which is really good. As the side to this gun is actually the penetration is subpar to the tier 8, to the other tier 8 tank destroyers like the Ferdinand, the Panther 2 get 246, the ISU gets 286, the T-28 prototype gets 246, I think, 48, something like that. But it's just the AT-15 gets the lowest penetration of all the current tier 8 tank destroyers with their top guns, which isn't really a good thing at all, I'd say. Well, so the other interesting thing on this tank is you get another option for a gun which you can use, but I'd say is worse than the top 20-pounder on this tank. The 32-pounder, this gun is actually the top gun on the Churchill gun carrier at tier 6. That tank is awful. I don't recommend you going down it unless you want to suffer. And basically 10.17 rounds a minute is very good for a gun that can deal that much alpha damage. But the problem is you're losing penetration again, because I mean you've already got the lowest penetration of all the tier 8 tank destroyers with the top gun, so making it even worse isn't really a good thing. But if you really want extra alpha damage over the 20-pounder, then feel free to go for this gun. But you should probably go for the 20-pounder, that's your best bet. 240mm of penetration, which as I've just highlighted isn't really great, and 248 with premium ammo. The average damage is 250, that's for people who really like alpha damage over DPM, and the accuracy is 0.33, and your aiming time is 2.1 seconds, which is really good as well. So that's just another option to consider. So this tank can still be a frontline tank, it's just that you should expect to be penetrated a lot more often because of the tier 8s that receive a lot higher penetration now. Your armor does become less useful, but that doesn't mean you can't still angle and bounce multiple shots. So overall, I actually think the AT-15 is still a good tank. Obviously, I can't really say anything about the tanks until I get a real feel for them when the update comes out, but yeah, I think it's pretty good. And now, moving on to the tier 9. So here we have the powerhouse that is the Tortoise. So this thing's finally made it into the game, and I actually really like it just because it looks so cool. So let's hope it's as good as it looks, in my opinion, basically. Gets 1800 health, which is more than the Object 140 and the same as this T62A. It also gets the exact same armor layout as its predecessor, 228 at the front, 152 at the sides and 101 at the rear, but as I said, it's becoming less relevant now because the tanks are getting much higher penetration and they can just go through the Tortoise's cheeks without a problem. The problem with the armor that the Tortoise has is it has the most massively bulging out weak spots at the front. Just look at that one. That's huge. It can be hit pretty easily. It's got no armor. It's a guaranteed penetration for anything shooting at you, and that's the way to kind of penetrate the thing. And even angling doesn't help against other tier 9s much. It can bounce, but it won't help as much as if you were in something like an AT2, for example, because the tanks have just much more penetration that overmatch your armor. Thing I forgot to mention with the AT15 as well is the gun depression starts to become insane. The AT15 got 10 degrees of gun depression, and this is following on with the Tortoise, 10 degrees of gun depression. I also forgot to mention one of the most important things about the tanks is the massive gun arc. The AT15 got 25 degrees each side, and the Tortoise now gets 20 degrees each side, which is another huge upside because it allows for angling between shots and a lot more as well. So moving on to maneuverability, the Tortoise weighs 77 tons. That's really heavy. You shouldn't try ramming into this thing, but if you are in a Tortoise, you could use that as a tactic, I guess, for mediums that are circling you. The engine power is 810, which is awful for this tank because it gets 10 horsepower per ton, which isn't great, and the traverse speed is 22 degrees a second, with the top speed being the usual 20 kilometers an hour. So finally we come on to the main attraction of the Tortoise, and that is its amazing gun. It's 120mm with 8.45 rounds a minute. This gives this tank the highest damage per minute in the game currently. I'm not sure whether the SU-152 beats it or not because I don't know its rate of fire off my head, but wow, that's insane. So it gets 259mm of penetration, which is again the lowest I think of all the tier 9 top guns, the tier 9 TD top guns. And it gets 326 premium penetration, and that HE penetration is absolutely insane too. 120mm is really good for HE because, well, you can penetrate the back of an E5, I think the side of an E3, but I'm not sure. No, definitely not. But anyway, average damage 400, 515, amazing accuracy of 0.31, and an amazing aim time of 1.7 seconds. So this gun is amazing. I honestly cannot wait to see how it performs once I get my hands on it when the update comes out. So I'm not really sure how the Tortoise is going to play. Is it going to be a frontline tank? Is it going to stay kind of second line or so? But one thing I do know is that the enemies will be scared when you come up in front of them, because you'll be able to dismantle half of their health in just seconds because of the amazing rate of fire of this gun. You can bounce shots as well by armoring and wiggling your armor, angling. And yeah, I really think this is a cool tank because of its looks, the amazing gun, and I'm really looking forward to this one. And last but certainly not least, the big daddy of the British tank destroyers in the tech tree, and probably one of the most hyped tanks to come into Blitz since release, we have the FV215B183. And wow, this thing. So this is interesting really. Well, let's take a look at it first and you'll see what I mean. As you'll all have noticed, this thing has a turret and is the only tank in this line to do so. This is the tier 10 in the British tech tree, and it marks the end of the British tank destroyers. So the 183 gets 1800 health, which is exactly the same as the Tortoise, but the thing is, this thing doesn't really need the health, so I'd say 1800 is just about fine. It's got 152mm of frontal hull armor, 50 at the side, 76 at the rear, which is awful, so you shouldn't really rely on your core armor much. You'll get penetrated by tier 9s and 10s, and you can kind of angle it against tier 8s, but they'll penetrate you as well, most likely. And the turret front is 254mm at the front, thick, 101 at the sides, and 76 at the rear. Basically what that means is don't shoot at the 183's turret at all, ever, frontally. If you're looking at this thing frontally, then prepare to lose a lot of health, and also shoot the lower front plate instead of the turret. But even though the FA215 V183 does get a turret, it doesn't actually traverse the whole way. It doesn't even traverse halfway actually. It only goes to 45 degrees each side. This thing gets 5 degrees of gun depression, which is pretty bad. So moving on to maneuverability, with the 183 we actually get a maneuverable tank. It's got 34 km/h top speed, which is really good for this line compared to the other tanks. It's got 32 degrees traverse speed, 16 turret traverse speed. The horsepower is 800 and it weighs 60 tons, so it might be, I don't think it will be able to get to its top speed on low ground, but it's a possibility. I'm just terrible with horsepower and stuff. So finally, the main attraction again of this tank is the gun. So I honestly expected this tank to get like a 1.5 rounds a minute, but it actually exceeded that so much. It got 2.73 rounds a minute. That is insanely good. And the interesting thing about the FV's gun is it either gets the highest penetration at tier 10 and in the game, or the lowest penetration at tier 10, depending on the type of ammo that you're firing. Speaking of the ammo you want to be firing, it's definitely HESH. I mean, here it's labelled as high explosive, but it's the premium high explosive you want with 220mm of penetration. So this is the ammo that everyone has to fire. It is costly. This tank is expensive to run, but if you have a 183, you're not really gonna be running it cheap, are you? You just want the damage. So with AP, this thing does 930 damage, and with the HESH it does 1300 damage. With the HE it also does 1300 damage. The accuracy is 0.4 and the aim time is, as you'd expect, a horrible 3.4 seconds. So let's talk about the damage a bit. So 1300 average damage, you can go to 1600 max the HESH ammo, and that's actually been lowered quite a lot from the PC, because on PC you're able to one-shot an IS-7 technically, and that has 2150 health, but it can roll for like 2188 max. And on here you're barely able to one-shot tier 9s. The only tier 9s you can one-shot are like T54s, Leopard PTAs, stock IS8s, M46 patterns as well, stock M46 patterns I should say, and you know, just stuff like that. So I mean, the rate of fire, it really does compensate for this, but the fact is that you're doing so much damage that I don't think it really matters. You're going to be one-shotting nearly every single tier 8, and you're going to be putting a massive dent into most of the tier 9s, or every tier 9, and you'll also be putting a massive dent into all the tier 10s. So really, I think this is actually pretty acceptable. Of course, I still need to try it. I'd actually need to try it for myself on the live server to see how it feels like and if it's good or not. But yeah, anyway, that was a preview of the new tank destroyers coming in 2.1. Hopefully that releases sometime soon, because I can't wait to try out the Tortoise and the 183. But anyway, that's the end of the video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and tell me what you think in the comments of the 183 and the Tortoise. I'd actually be interested to know. But yeah, thanks for watching, and bye.